Hi there. This is the last lecture of the semester. Classes end a week from today. That's if you have snow day add-ons, which we do. Here, this is our 9th lecture of the year. And if you have any interest in just keeping up with what we're going to do next year, just send me an email and I'll make sure you're on our mailing list. I want to thank our sponsors, which include the College of the Environment and Life Sciences and the College of Arts and Sciences, the Rhode Island chapter of ASLA, American Society of Landscape Architects, and Landscape Forms, a manufacturer of playground and other equipment. I want to thank our students who have done a really nice job this year of having a reception. I know everyone expects that food will just pop up out of the floor. It doesn't. So I want to thank Emma and Emily and Olivia and I think Katie, and there's a fourth, and Alexa, if she also participates, but she does over the year. So thank you very much for this reception. Tonight we're pleased to have Kaki Martin from Klopfer Martin up in Boston. She's a founding principal of the firm that was established in 2007. The focus of the work of their firm is the interface of building and site within the urban landscape, so they are focusing on urban landscapes much of the time. Streetscapes, downtown corridors, and districts. Their work extends from Metropolitan Boston to Providence. They did the Schoolyard, they've done Kennedy Plaza master planning, and their work extends beyond the Providence River and the Bay over to Shanghai, Abu Dhabi, and Belarus. The quality of their work is recognized as the firm has won numerous awards from the American Society of Landscape Architects. They won the Rudy Bruner Award of Urban Excellence, the Environmental Design and Research Association an award, and their work has been published in the United States, in China, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, and Hong Kong. Kaki Martin is a landscape architect who earned her MLA at Harvard at the GSD, Graduate School of Design. She's an adjunct professor at RISD and has been one at Harvard as well. Prior to establishing the partnership with Mark Klopfer, she worked at George Hargrave's office and also with Martha Schwartz. She serves her communities well. She's a board member of the Community Design Resource Center in Boston. She was a former chair of the Cambridge Conservation Commission, and she serves as chair of the Boston Society of Landscape Architects Nomination Board. She's also a founding member of Good Sports, a Boston-based nonprofit devoted to ensuring that disadvantaged youth have the equipment they need to participate in organized sports, athletic programs. So there's community service, there are award-winning landscapes, and there's teaching. Full body of work. Will you welcome Kaki Martin, please?
Really nice introduction, and I appreciate it very much, and appreciate being invited to be here, and I appreciate all of you. I guess I didn't realize at the time how close to the end of the semester it is, and I know I've been there, and I know the effort it takes also to be here, but hopefully I'll distract you for an hour and get you thinking about some other things other than your studio projects. Can these lights go maybe?
Sure.
Or,
yeah.
Okay. So one talent I don't have is doing a good job of timing my my talk. So I think this is a little overpacked, but we'll dive in and see where we go here.
I can use the fabulous model.
Yeah, please do. Feel free. And can everybody hear me? Is that working okay? Being asked to come here and speak or speak anywhere really always gives us a nice chance of reflection and starting to kind of recontextualize or sort of pull together thoughts about the work of our firm, either elaborate on it or think about it in a slightly new way or create new pairings or mashups of collections of work. So this is about inserted landscapes and our observation that we, as Will said, really are mostly committed to the urban world in terms of our work, and we're finding more and more that our work are these very small, relatively small insertions of landscape in places where maybe it's unlikely or where we're having to work hard to kind of mine for the opportunity. And that's really what I'm kind of talking about tonight. So this image here sort of caught my eye, this idea of this little bit of moss or lichen finding its own opportunity in really what is the context of actually it's a one plank board of a kind of wetland walk. And that's really the way I'm beginning to think about our work is these very small insertions. And because I'm in Rhode Island, I just to 1 minute talk about the Schoolyard and really say that this was, in a way, the beginnings of this opportunistic mining for these sort of insertion landscapes, probably for our firm. And understanding that the Schoolyard is sitting in the industrial valley of Providence, a much different scale than the rest of Providence, downtown, College Hill, et cetera. And really we had to find for ourselves this incredible an opportunity. Along the Woonasquatucket River, there's a little bit of landscape, but here's the Schoolyard site, and it's really sort of devoid of landscape, and we had to find a way to find it. So the pre-construction shot here, and there it is, an aerial shot that a photographer did, and sort of realizing that we inserted and found what we could. This also made me realize, something's going on here. There we go. I pulled these up. This is sort of just a little mention of process. We literally showed these images as precedent images to the client. They're not the most beautiful, but they get at what I'm saying, which is this plant material is finding opportunity in these piles of asphalt, that multiflora rose, climbing over asphalt, pushing up, the roots pushing up through the pavement, and also showing their own space. This is before construction of the plant material that was finding its own way. So it's the only client where we've showed them a before photo of their own project to tell them that that's what we're going to try to recreate. And we just had to figure out how to bring that back and find the opportunity to bring it back. So just a few shots. This is sort of the de facto living room that's sort of happened, and we call this series the Kansas. We call this the Kansas series. And this shot, this is just a few months after construction and planting. We planted in the spring, and this was the fall, and then a year or so out. And how that kind of unruly urban wild landscape, we found ways to allow it to come back in a slightly more organized way, but not really. And we're able to really say that because they were very afraid we were going to change the tone of their landscape. So that was sort of the starting point for us of finding these opportunities. So I'm going to talk about 4 projects, kind of moving up in scale from the smallest to the largest, this little list. The Longfellow Bridge median I'll start with. The Longfellow Bridge, for those of you who don't know, is one of the bridges connecting Boston to Cambridge. In fact, our office is just kind of a couple of blocks up. We're looking toward Cambridge here. The water of the Charles River is flowing this way. So we're kind of in an upstream position in this shot. It's also known as the Salt and Pepper Bridge because of the piers. It's currently under construction. It's a state-owned bridge, but it abuts Cambridge. And we've been hired by the city of Cambridge to reimagine this median, which is the sort of interface and gateway to Cambridge from the Longfellow Bridge. Not an easy site plan to show in a slide, so I'll just sort of move on to our renderings. And really how we are finding a way to, this is the existing condition, and the city had kind of been planting it up, the median up, and so we knew, we kind of captured some of that plant material that was hauled off to other places in the city to be reused, but we wanted to reimagine this as sort of a thoughtful, a gateway that was more than just sort of a planting scheme. And here's our proposal. Is an insertion of a fence because there's a lot of traffic and safety issues back and forth here across the way. We inserted a crossing using earthwork and then this steel picket, that rotating fence that becomes this sort of gateway piece or median piece. It rotates and changes color. So here's a study. And then what I actually inserted, which hopefully you can see, which is really the best part, I think, is the construction document drawing. So it's all it is L angle, rotating around, revealing the various colors. And changing also with seasonal plantings, and having these colors emerge and disappear depending on the season as well. Stepping up in scale is the, oh, now we're on an automatic. What is going on? Sorry. Boston Schoolyard Initiative Project. Well, I can't stay on that one. We've done 10 of these projects throughout neighborhoods in Boston. Here are 9 site plans showing how these classrooms have inserted their ways into these very urban elementary school campuses. Site plans for each of them. And then sort of just images of the existing conditions. Most of these were really very derelict sites, paved schoolyards. In some cases, existing conditions did mean a little bit of open space, but was sort of not well taken care of or had been neglected and really wasn't being used. Leftover spaces behind the schools, and we sort of recaptured them, found the opportunity to reinsert plans. The other thing we did was set up a kit of parts approach for each of these. We really transitioned this work, had been done by a nonprofit, a lot of volunteer work. We were able to step in and kind of create a structure or a kit of parts approach that then allowed this work to be publicly bid and built by contractors using city funds. So it didn't have to all rely on volunteer work. Grants were gotten, but it went through a standard bidding process. And in order to do that and to make it efficient, we evolved this kit of parts approach. So this is sort of a sort of generic site list section to just demonstrate this idea. This is the sheet really showing ideas about classroom management. So understanding that a class needs a large gathering area, it needs dispersed seating for students to go off on their own. They need to be able to gather as a group. the use of an idea of an overhead structure or armature that allows either a wayfinding device for a teacher to say, meet there, go do your investigation and come back and everybody will meet here. It also became a place to put thermometers, weather vanes, any sorts of kind of attachments could come onto here related to weather. And the other kind of key thing we realized needed to go in every one of these was a child-scaled gate. So if we go back to the site plans and context, we understand that moving from the back door of the Russell, a teacher needs to be able to move a group of students, a large group of students, into the outdoor classroom. They need to cross through a threshold of a gateway. And so that became a key thing psychologically for children to not realize they're not at recess, they're moving into a place of learning in transition. So all the different site plans, all of these sort of kits of parts were deployed on all of these sites in different ways depending on the opportunities that were presented at each site. The second layer of kind of kit of parts strategy really was finding the opportunities for the actual learning and what those types of spaces would mean and needed to be. So we talked about how to manage the class and move them spatially through, but what were those spaces of learning? So we knew, we sort of codified a sample woodland, which offered all sorts of seasonal variety, so students could go out at all times of year and understand seasonal change and kind of different ways of thinking about planting deciduous evergreen. Raised planters are really deployed at every site as well, giving them a chance to grow things, and I'll show you some of the detailing on those that we developed. A meadow, so by contrast to the sample woodland, we always put in kind of a meadow, and built it up on landform. So understanding that the smallest amount of topographic change for a young child that lives in the city is really kind of actually life-changing in some cases, and things we've heard kids exclaim like, I'm in the jungle, it's amazing the difference that can make. And then similar to the gate that I've already talked about, this idea of boundary needed to be part of all of these projects as well, so that there's a clear understanding for the children that it's a place of learning and not a place of recess. So that's sort of the larger framework, and I'm just going to show you, I think I have 3 schools in here to just show you, more precisely how on a couple of sites this kind of kit of parts was deployed. The Russell School in Dorchester is one of the sites that had sort of the most amount of land available to it. It was a parcel that no one paid attention to. It was fenced off. As it turned out, with a little bit of research, they found out that the school department did own it and was able to kind of allow the Russell to get a grant and do this project. So within the context of their school parcel, it's sort of tucked back here. So this sort of triangular site, the site plan here in a sort of schematic or maybe design development level sketch section that we use to talk to the school groups about, but kind of deploying all those things that I just mentioned, sort of woodland, an armature space, there's some raised beds in here, and then this sort of meadow earthwork that wraps out and fills kind of a large portion right in here. Entry is here, and the woodland kind of makes its way around the edges. The landform, as I said, is where the meadow is, and this kind of gathering and sort of wet laboratory space, we also call it, planting beds, a table for students to gather around and a teacher to lay out an assignment, and the finished product here. So this is I think a 2nd or 3rd grade class out with a couple of teachers. They're doing a writing assignment in this case about observation. And so the children are sort of allowed to, they're sort of moving in groups and also alone and making these sort of writing observations. Whenever we could, if there were existing trees nearby In this case, there were a lot of locusts in this old parcel. We kept things like we kept many of them, and then did things like would keep slices. So we cut the tree down, only so far, and have the arborist cut a couple of slices that then allows for a teacher to do exactly what she's doing here, lift up, have a student sort of investigate a whole nother world that's happening below. This is another detail that we developed that was deployed at many of the schools, even ones that we haven't, classrooms that we didn't design, this root viewing window. So the idea that by sliding this door across, a child can sort of see and understand and make the connection between what's happening above and what's happening below. Simple things of little add-ons like a leaf cage are also something that were deployed at many of the schools and allow students to participate, actually very clearly participate. We put a measuring device on the side that then allows them to understand decomposition over time, so they can note the height that it is one week and from the next week. And just a few more shots again of that day when kids were out on their sort of observational, when the meadow was in full bloom. Other things we tried to do is really emphasize this idea of reusing and recycling. In the case of the Russell, which didn't have any concrete, we took concrete that we were ripping up from another school and turned it into, and had it transported to the Russell to become a permeable paving. And so it allows the kids to also understand that lesson. Stormwater is another thing we sort of would try to sort of convey ideas about. On top of this storage bin that was needed for the teachers to store tools, we started doing these sort of mini green roofs and having students understand the difference of runoff between the green roof side and the non-green roof side. The Winship School in Alston is a little bit slightly different site and one of the smallest ones. And I should say that these are, for the most part, anywhere from, say, 900 square feet to 1,500 square feet. They're not very big spaces. The Winship, under at some other time, I think maybe in the late 80s, had received a grant and had made this little space in here. So there's some mature plant material. There's a little sort of walking trail in here. And we took the opportunity, we sort of added on. We cut out more of the asphalt and sort of tacked on and built upon what they already had to create this site plan. So again, same kit of parts, entry gate, deck, gathering space. Here's the meadow. You can sort of see meadow and landform here. The kind of wet lab, green roof, planters, places where the hose connection is. And then we sort of supplemented in what was already a somewhat established woodland condition. So again, existing condition here, and a few shots of the finished product. Things as simple as these sort of log and stump seating, we think are quite amazing, because a child who's so used to sitting in a very standard chair gets outside, and there's a little bit of balance involved in some of these, but how they all occupy them, whether it's a table or something to sit on, and watching children sort of adapt and get comfortable with their own bodies in order to do their assignment is really kind of amazing. And at every school, we've noticed the same thing. Other things to sort of reinforce curriculum. So we read through all of the curriculum, and of course, I think like many public school departments, there's very serious criteria that are required, that teachers have to get through a certain amount of lessons, and they have to contain certain things for the children to then take the state testing. So we would take opportunities like offense to look at patterning, and that a child could notice A, B patterning. Additionally, making very obvious things like connections, very simple ways of showing very clear and detailed, make very clear a very simple construction detail, but having a child understand how something is put together and made in a very straightforward way. The Mason School in Dorchester was really probably one of the most depressing and miserable sights I've ever seen in my life. That is, concertina wire up above here, and kids were out here playing every day. This is a construction company's yard, and that literally was their play space. And these images below show the after. This is what I saw the first day I visited the site. It was miserable. And the final, and really once you're inside, that you really, there's really a transformation, and it allows the students to sort of tune out the context in which they're going to school and have a completely immersive experience. This detail is sort of simple, but really just showing stacked timbers. So again, kind of understanding units, 4 units for that step, 2 units for the top step, getting to see the butt end grain of wood. And again, the same idea of kids kind of getting comfortable, finding other ways of sitting and doing their work instead of being sort of sitting in a upright, rigid chair. So finding these children sort of making the space their own. And these are just a couple more shots from a few other schools showing, again, ideas of, this is a series of beds on a slope, and this is the lowermost bed that had gotten the tallest. And this sort of idea of connection of a child being able to really see and have the soil at their eye level has been really kind of successful, and it's another way of honing observation skills. Really simple flagstone, but just having the contractor pick out, having the contrasting colors and creating sort of pattern with natural materials, but sort of using a sort of design sensibility of a very sort of squared up carpet. Again, a tool that a teacher uses very often inside, and how we can translate it for their kind of use as really a manager of groups of young people in the outside. And one of the last schools we worked on was a school that was an inclusive school. Included anyone of any ability, was all mainstreamed together. So it's a remarkable school with children of all sorts of abilities tracking at the same time. And it's an incredible school, really creating a remarkable group of world citizens. But this is a school where we had new sort of challenges to think about. First of all, this idea that the children at this school are learning from tablets, which was completely new to us. There are children who are completely nonverbal, and the only way they communicate is actually using tablets. Or also just thinking in a whole different way about another level of sensory experience for this community of students as well. So shifting up in gears here, a little bit in size, but also to higher education, to Suffolk University. We were hired to do what is Suffolk University's first open space. It's a very, very urban campus. Part of their pitch at one point was the fact that the whole city is their campus. There is no campus. The city of Boston is the campus. This building was a historic Metropolitan District Commission building, which was really the legacy of the state park system in Massachusetts. Suffolk University purchased the building and tore it down in order to build a new classroom building for themselves. And in part of that deal worked a way or the state, I mean, it depends on whose point of view you want to take, but the state, as part of the deal, required that Suffolk redo the plaza, which if any of you know Boston City Hall Plaza, you see probably some similarities, and they were done in the very same similar era and same palette of brick and concrete. So this is the site plan, which maybe you can't see from the aerial. There's a grade drop from the upper plazas to the lower plaza of about 13 feet. It's not insignificant. This is a very steep hill wrapping up. So this is really on Beacon Hill, the backside of Beacon Hill. So we had to mitigate from these two terraces down to the plaza level, as I said, about a 13-foot grade difference in a very small amount of space. Additionally, we had the opportunity, I'll put it that way, of building a whole landscape over a leaking, decrepit, 4-story deep parking garage that wasn't going anywhere, that the state owned and that we were told can't change, and also obviously couldn't be damaged in the process. So, what to do really is the question. We had to find ways of inserting landscape, which really came in the form of planters carved into the sort of stadium seat bleacher strategy that we had to help mitigate and really become the occupiable space. In our minds, we didn't want to just have upper terrace, lower plaza, and sort of one link. We knew that this space, because it took up so much of the project, in fact, had to be occupiable in a way that became the space. That's where we imagine the students are going to end up spending most of their time. This is a Suffolk building as well, so there's sort of clear connection for many students. Once the building opens, it will really be a desire line, but we want it to be more than that. Actually, we think that's the kind of key campus space. So we have no real ground to build on. We're building over a garage, and we had to, zooming in here a little bit, work in pockets of soil. There weren't not a lot of volume that we could create. We had very significant structural limitations with how much soil we could put on and how much concrete we could put up here. So there were a lot of constraints for us. But again, sort of finding how much and trying to get as much green and planted area in here as we could. A few of our finished renderings. And kind of one of the sort of signature details that we're really pleased about, and they're being worked on right now. The Metropolitan District Commission's legacy really in Boston, and it doesn't exist anymore. It's been sort of subsumed by another state department. So this kind of historic park steward agency is gone as it had existed. And in our minds, we had to commemorate it somehow, we were told, which we were happy to do, but we were very resistant to ye old bronzy plaque with 10 old white guys' names on it saying, whatever, with a bunch of dates on it tucked away on a wall somewhere. And instead, we felt that the legacy of that parks agency is, in fact, the number of open spaces in Massachusetts, and developed a granite plinth, which I should back up for a second, which sits at the base of the stadium stair that has all of the names of the parks and open spaces. This includes historic parkways. as you can see, the Charles River Esplanade, all of these kind of, and the spaces known to many, some spaces not known to very many. So it's a remarkable list that we have, in fact, not engraved, but as you see here, the letters are, in fact, raised in granite. And it's under construction now. So this construction view, you can start to see the structural walls in here starting to make and frame out the planting areas. So that sort of relates to this view. The courthouse beyond. And further starting to understand. So we're looking at the upper slab of the garage right there. And then the framing out of the walls, upper terraces here. I put in a couple of shots from the nursery trip that Sharon in our office made a couple of weeks ago. As I said, the soils are limited. It's incredibly windy because we're up nearing the top of Beacon Hill. Tall buildings all around. It's like a kind of hurricane funnel cloud half the time up there. It's the wind chill is incredible. We had to be very careful about species selection, and there really aren't very many trees on the project, so it put that much more emphasis on what the trees look like and where they came from. So this is one of these kind of war stories of in the field at the nursery trying to figure out, these are two Acer Genala, multi-stem and single stem, and trying to sort of strategize. We had spec'd multi-stem and realized, at the nursery that was a bad move, and we're able to sort of shift gears to single stem, which will then be starting to fit into these upper planters. We're using honey locust down lower in the larger soil volumes. But there's an aerial still shot that we have the construction camera on. So you start to see really what's happening below that landscape and sort of all the kind of understanding of context and the way in which we had to strategize insertion of landscape into this plaza. So I'm sort of shifting gears again, but staying with our institutional work. This is actually a very lovely view of the Longwood medical area of Boston, which is really where, aside from Mass General, many hospital institutions are located in the LMA, right along the Riverway. You see the Charles River beyond, there's downtown Boston, out to the harbor. And we are working at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, which really runs mostly down Francis Street, which is right here. Children's is here. Dana-Farber Cancer Center is here. Here's Harvard Medical School. So all of this, Beth Israel is here. Really all of this just about is medical campus. And as I said, the Brigham, where we're working, really runs along here, along Francis Street, and is expanding this way. This is their newest building, the Shapiro, and further still are building, this has been demolished, and they're building another building, which I'll talk about in a minute, down here. So while this is like quite a sort of lovely sort of contextualized view of the LMA with the Riverway there, the reality kind of on the ground is dramatically different. The development of the Brigham over time has really been chock-a-block. You could argue not always so well thought out. Certainly doesn't have the grace of the way Harvard Medical School reads. Here's the sort of original Peter Brent Brigham building here. And I said, here's Francis Street. This is Brigham Circle. For those of you that might know Boston, this is a green line. Tracks are here. So really it's mostly the northern edge of Francis Street that is the Brigham, with this exception down here. Housing all in here. So kind of contrast and scales for the folks. This is mostly sort of triple decker. But as you can see, not a place with open space or landscape. And in fact, the Brigham's history was very much grounded in the landscape. These are old historic views. They're from a book that was published in 1900. We're not exactly sure of the dates of these shots, but this is a view across to the muddy river from the patient's dining room. So this is called a sunny nook for convalescents. So the idea that the landscape was used as part of the healing of patients certainly is grounded in the Brigham's history, and as it is in many hospitals, but somewhere that had been lost. And we were hired a couple of years ago to start a landscape master plan for the Brigham, which many people say, how could you possibly do that? There's no place, there's no place to start to even begin to think about doing a landscape master plan for the hospital. So I could do an hour of existing conditions here, but I just threw a few of my favorites. This is beautifully mulched, but it's also over parking garage deck. This is one of my favorite details I've ever seen. These are fiberglass planters cantilevered off the back of this concrete wall that then drops down into kind of a maintenance pit. And they're just sort of floating up. I mean, they're the strangest set of planters. And really, this is one end of Francis Street. This is arrival at the hospital. This is their parking garage. So not the most, while it's sort of some of the best medical care perhaps in the world, certainly not a lovely and inviting campus. We teamed with NBBJ architects who we frequently collaborate with. Also did on the Suffolk University project as well. They're the architects. And started really realizing that in order to make a dent here and make sense of what is a really actually complex and peculiar campus, we had to be thinking about the landscape and the architecture all together. And started to think about nodes, clear nodes of arrival. This is the historic Peter Bent Brigham building, 45 Francis Street, 75. So I won't get into all this, but sort of starting to understand nodes and then moments of connectivity. And then how that then translated and became further articulated to distinguish between building and landscape. And that's what this diagram is starting to parse out. So where is it a landscape move that's starting to do that? And where is it an architectural intervention to help knit this place back together? But in general, we had to just quickly try to find every place we could where we thought we could insert landscape. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And that really the landscape was in the end the piece that is tying everything together, both interior and exterior, to kind of make this campus be a restful and healing place and allow for as much kind of connection back to nature as possible. So these are a few renderings of some of the projects we have underway. So we have multiple projects underway. I'm going to kind of talk about and identify three of them at kind of three different key locations on campus. The entry of 45 Francis is being reimagined. I'm going to talk about that. Then looking at, this is we call this the corn cobs. This is where really the patient towers, these are really mostly patient bedrooms. And look at the opportunities we've found for roof intervention. And then that new building I told you about is called BBF, which stands for Brigham Building of the Future, which only means that they don't have a donor yet. So it has that awkward name for now, but it's under construction, so it's happening as the third piece. So first I'm going to talk about the 45 entry. Current condition, there's kind of a not very large canopy, kind of canvas stretched canopy to welcome patients. It really doesn't keep patients out of the rain. There are kind of rules and regulations for medical institutions about providing cover for drop-off. This does not meet that regulation. A couple of pear trees that are doing okay, but a little bit of hedge here or there. But again, not the most kind of wonderful moment of arrival. And our kind of rendering of sort of reimagining that. And it's everything from trying to find ways to get those walls down into the garage, growing with plants, how to sort of maximize and change species to sort of more upright and clumber to get more plants, and how to really reimagine the edge condition of the drop-off, as well as redesign the canopy drop-off, which we're doing as well. So here's another view. So we learned quickly too that because we can't always find soil volume, we're, for the first time really in our practice, are realizing that sort of potted and raised planters are an important sort of strategy at key locations. The other piece of this project, let me just back up for 1 second, of the 45. So here's the 45. That little mulch bed I'd shown you earlier, there are these funny little wedges of space that, because of the way the buildings were built, leave these funny wedges of space. So that's really what we capture. So in addition to all this sort of fancy and the big money stuff out here, we said we've got to address moments like this. So here's a hallway, I'm in an interior hallway, and people walking through, patients, doctors, this is the view out. And that's out to that 45 entry. So around the corner here would be the canopy. So we're looking at ways of building up soil volume to then allow this to be a small little pocket landscape with this enormous window. We don't have to do a thing, and have there be view out to plant material. The other side of the hallway is another enormous window, except this time grade is down a floor. So you look at this window down, you look down on a similar kind of mulch pit as this. And we had to figure out a way to get the landscape up at this level to do this. So this is what we've done. We're building a 1-story structure, CMU block, it'll never be seen by anybody, creating this infrastructure that then allows this whole piece to be soil volume, to then allow this to be planted, and here's that hallway with the two glass windows. We have to allow maintenance around the edges of it. So at the top, we end up with grate. We're using sort of fluffy, viney plant material to start to help cover up the grate eventually. So this has just started construction as well. So rooftops really also are obviously an opportunity. They're harder to deal with on existing buildings because if structural considerations haven't been thought of and then the building is maxed out, it's hard to do that, or it's costly to reinforce. But we've been looking and studying really for probably a couple of years, working with incredible structural engineers at McNamara Salvia about how to find ways of greening roofs, particularly in places where this, again, here's the corn cob and plan. This is the 5th floor, moves out onto the roof of the building around it. There's direct access. This is an elevator core, and we thought, God, we can get people out. If we can bust through that wall, we could actually make something out here that the patients on the 5th floor, which is a cancer treatment floor, could actually use. So just in the context of the campus, that's like wedged. I'm looking right in here, and I'm also looking down in here. So a couple of places we're looking at. So here's an existing condition of a view through a glass wall, architects helped them and they put a Frit on the glass to kind of filter that pretty miserable view. And we're kind of saying, well, what if we can make it, this one would be an inaccessible green roof, take the Frit off, allow this to become a seating area inside, and have really sort of transform that exterior space for the hospital. And now the 5th floor I was talking about is tucked right in here. So that last space was down in here. 5th floor, so that's the ceiling of the 4th story with the skylights in it. Here's that elevator core I mentioned. And we sort of said, schematically, sort of, we think we can make something out there. Here we are again in our 3D model looking in plan. We're talking about that space. So this was a little study of sun angles, trying to understand. This is one of the concept schemes we did and a graphic that we presented to the client about understanding how really there's always some nice full sun out there. And a couple of views of one of the current schemes we're working on now for that. So it would include an interior space first, sort of viewing gardens that would be all season, and then at this threshold step out to fully exterior space. You see that here too, oops. So new, extending that wall out. Here's that elevator core, another view where we're also trying to put it in context of other green roofs on that building. And a section of what that scheme might look like. And starting to understand how we are having to do some soil reinforcing of that roof. So there is some new steel reinforcement in there, but minimizing and trying to very clearly strategize, working with the structural engineers, how much soil we can place. And then the last project is the BBF that I mentioned, which is a new building at the Brigham under construction. So here's that site plan. Francis Street is up here. Here's that garage that I had shown you the view of. Francis Street is up here. Shapiro Building is their most recent building. And then the Brigham Building for the future is under construction. So this is a affordable housing group, Roxbury Tenants of Harvard. So they own this parcel. And this is a residential, new residential building that's going in, with an associated playground being done by, not by us, by another firm. But the hospital sort of was asked to make this improvement here. So we have an at-grade kind of green park spine here, as well as a series of green roof strategies and interventions on this new building. Now, of course, as I mentioned, what's easier doing green roofs on a new building is that you can actually have the structure designed accordingly. So here you see really our just simple summary graphic of understanding where we're doing just an extensive 4-inch soil or an intensive and the depth. So this is kind of our big move here in terms of green roofs, of an occupiable green roof, which starts to look like, is looking like this. And this is our final scheme here. This is a pavilion for sort of not public. It'll be for hospital use only, for large events, lectures, etc., award ceremonies, and kind of their kind of special ceremonial space, offering the ability for that to sort of extend to the outside for events to happen, and then a more kind of solitary or experience, more private experience, smaller group opportunities further out. And a couple of views of what that looks like. These are all sort of lab spaces, so making sure that people weren't walking right next to people's offices was important, and one of the challenges of this scheme. And then a view down from the further end looking back toward that pavilion space. Down at the ground, this kind of spine, pedestrian spine park that I mentioned is here. So the Roxbury Tenants of Harvard is on the right, that housing. We're managing here, there's a huge hatch here for arrival of equipment like MRI machines. So at hospitals, you're dealing constantly with the needs of all sorts of subterranean pieces of equipment that have to come in and out of the hospital easily enough. So how can we use a little bit of earthwork to sort of mask that slab, but still it needs to be fully accessible in the event that it needs to be accessed. A couple more views. And then really the last piece that I want to end on about this is the what we're calling the infusion garden. So Brigham Building for the hospital will be, Brigham Building for the future rather, will be the building where the oncology unit will be. It's where people will receive their chemotherapy. And we have a small garden that we've developed called the infusion garden. That is just, again, another sort of opportunity, a long sort of slice of landscape at the base of the building. We looked at this idea of oku gardens. It's a Chinese and Japanese term that's used that, that really talks about, it's hard to kind of describe in English in some ways, and I don't even fully understand it, but it really is about the creation of depth, the creation of sort of sacred and profound spaces. So this is an example of one, and this idea that it's really kind of made in layers. This kind of foreground, the middle ground, and background. So we really use that as a pitch to our client. And this idea of kind of layers of scrim. This is the view of the infusion garden from the street. So we're using kind of a milky glass shadow play will happen. It'll be lit. We also have a segment of it that is wood. So it's sort of change in material, has some transparency, but obviously privacy is of incredible importance. So it sort of impacts positively the streetscape, planting on the outside, and then really creates this shadow play on both sides. And then from the interior is really the main, it's the main kind of view and the most important view of this kind of it's only about, I think it's about 6 feet deep, slight slope of this kind of patterned carpet of planting, changing, working on seasonality. We really have sort of something happening or something visible all times of the year. So a mix of evergreens and flowering plants and perennials, really mostly perennial or evergreen. And then this sort of scrim, wood scrim with vine planting beyond. And as I said, that sort of milky glass here, allowing the plants on the outer side to kind of provide shadow play. So that's kind of our most, in a way, one of our most sort of precious insertions at the Brigham. And that is it. So thank you.
Time for questions. I have a question.
Okay.
You have playgrounds and you have hospitals,
Yeah,
and they're very different clients.
they are.
So what's the process that engages people and allows you to persuade them what is good and how you learn from them as well?
And then what I thought you were going to ask. Well, you know, I'll take it back to just the fact that we feel strongly about having it be a good match between us, a client, and the challenges of the project. And we've resisted saying, we only do hospitals, or we only do schools. And I think as a result of that, we just have to be flexible. And you know, the relationship with a client takes time to understand and develop. And in all of these cases, I mean, we did 10 schools in 4 years. So sometimes we're on the same schedule with 3 schools at a time, which meant I was going to school committee meetings with very different personalities, you know, weekly. And sure, having to present to the president of the Brigham it's you know, a whole nother challenge. But I think we think of ourselves as a flexible firm, and we try to we allow there to be some time and room for us to know our client, to then be able to do what we need to do, which is be convincing. And I think the other answer is, we don't see ourselves as a firm that dictates to a client what we think needs to happen. And we very much think of ourselves as being in partnership with our clients. And when we really feel strongly about something, they know. But we also, projects have gotten much better because of our dialogue with our clients and their ideas, and us taking their ideas and finding a way to corral them or whatever it is. So we're not interested in even no matter how fabulous a project might be, if it's a client that doesn't want to kind of partner with us, it's not going to be a good match for us. Yeah.
I'm curious on your Suffolk project, knowing that you could not infiltrate your stormwater into the parking garage below. How did you solve that, and did you integrate it with some of the plantings?
We did. And I didn't want to take off into that, like, that could be a whole nother lecture, but yeah, those sort of series of bathtubs, right? And there's spaces where they aren't, there's not soil, you know, they were all sort of standalone pockets of soil. There are a lot of core, there's drain running through spaces, there's a lot of obviously waterproof and protection board, but the whole thing does connect. And it took a lot of, you know, just a lot of coordination with the civil, mechanical, plumbing, because it also has to end up, it goes back through into the garage. And it's not just like we somehow get it to sort of the street system. It first goes back down, in, and then out. So yeah, that's all been coordinated, and the topping slab is slightly tilted to help make sure that water is just always moving the right way. We did a fair amount of kind of belt and suspender strategies in that regard, to kind of make sure that they don't end up with a big mess. But yeah, it was a big, and now that it's under construction, and it's about 2 blocks from our office, so that's convenient. But things are never as you assume they're going to be, so we're doing these slight kind of reactive shifts in that regard. We've had to do a few times with drainage related issues. So, yes.
I just have one
Yeah.
question. So you have these schoolyards
Yeah.
that are ensconced in communities,
Yes.
and I have to assume that all schools are different in how they're handled by their communities.
Yes.
So what happens? How do you control what takes place at the schoolyards that you're designing?
So the first thing is that the committee was convened by our client group, which was a kind of a 2-headed client of the school department / facilities department of the city, and the nonprofit entity, which was the Schoolyard Initiative. would convene a committee of teachers, in many cases also the head of the school, the principal of the school, and they worked very hard always to have parent/neighbor representation on that committee. That worked really well in some places and not at all in others. It is public land, you know, I mean, there's this issue of, is it reasonable that if it's public land in a neighborhood and it's open space, that those be locked? The school department, who really can't advocate for locking of public space, right? It's just, would sort of let us collectively take it as on a case-by-case basis. So in some communities, those outdoor classrooms are not fenced. There's a fence, but it's maybe there's just a rope across it, or you know, or there's no gate at all, or nothing lockable. And in other cases, they're locked. And it depended on the neighborhood and the school and their kind of sensibility about their context. So in some cases, the teacher would have to go to the office, sign out a key. In other cases, there was an agreement that there's a padlock number and everybody knows it, or and including parents or some neighbors too would be invited to the Russell School. Neighbors plant and use the raised beds in the summertime. And there's this kind of trade-off, and so their crops are maybe finishing up as students are coming back, and there's a big, really remarkable exchange at that school with the neighborhood. So a few of them are like that. And then others, the Mason, you know, sort of suffers in the summer.
Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you very much for your presentation.